AITA for exposing my best friend's abusive fiancé. My name is Fernanda. I'm 26, and for most of my life, my best friend has been a woman named Paloma. We met when we were both 15. Two shy girls who bonded over whispered secrets, late-night phone calls that stretched until dawn, and endless dreams about leaving our small town behind. We talked about city lights, tiny apartments with big windows, and a freedom we thought we could just reach out and grab. Paloma was always the bold one. She laughed the loudest, loved the hardest, and lived like she was constantly performing for an invisible audience. She wore bright red lipstick to school just because she could. Teachers called her spirited. I called her fearless. I, on the other hand, was cautious, the type to triple-check homework and keep quiet when others yelled. She used to say, "You think before you breathe, Fern." We balanced each other. Her fire softened by my calm, my hesitation softened by her courage. Everything changed when she met Riot. He was 32 when we were 17. Too old, too confident, and too deliberate in everything he did. The first time he picked her up from school, I thought he was a family friend or maybe an older cousin. But when he leaned over to open the passenger door for her, his hand brushed her back in a way that made my stomach twist. He smiled at me politely, but his eyes lingered too long, assessing, cold, and too aware. "Don't look at me like that," Paloma said later, rolling her eyes when I asked about him. "He's mature, Fern. He actually listens to me, not like the boys our age." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to tell her that men like him didn't listen, they studied. After graduation, she moved in with him. Her parents were furious. Her mother cried for weeks. But Paloma said she was happy. She called it freedom. She stopped answering my texts as often, but when she did, she always sounded tired and defensive. I visited once that fall. Their house was clean, unnaturally so, and quiet in a way that made the air feel heavy. Riot greeted me with that same polite smile and called me Fern, like we were old friends. That first night, we watched a movie. Paloma laughed at something silly, loud and genuine like she used to, and Riot immediately said, "Keep it down, babe." The room went silent. Later, when she commented on how handsome an actor was, Riot turned off the TV without a word. She mumbled an apology into the silence. I wanted to run, but I had no car, no ride, and she insisted everything was fine. When he dropped me off that Monday morning, he said, "You're a good friend, Fern. You'll understand one day that control isn't cruelty, it's love." I remember sitting there, watching his car disappear down the street, and feeling like I'd just escaped something I couldn't name. After that, I told Paloma I couldn't visit again. She accused me of judging her relationship, said I was jealous of how much Riot loved her. We didn't talk for almost a year. Then, out of nowhere, she called me one night, sobbing. She said she missed me, that she just wanted to talk. I forgave her, too easily maybe. For a while, it felt like old times. She helped me choose my wedding flowers, came to my engagement party, even cried during my ceremony. Riot wasn't invited. She laughed, she danced. She told me she'd forgotten how it felt to breathe without someone watching. But slowly, she began making excuses again. "He's working on himself," she'd say. "He just gets anxious sometimes." Then she started canceling plans because he wasn't comfortable with her being out late. Her messages got shorter, filtered. Once, she sent me a text that read, "I promise I'll be home soon. Please don't be mad." She deleted it within seconds. Months later, she told me they were engaged. She asked me to be her maid of honor. I almost said no, but when I looked at her, pale, tired, her smile trembling, I couldn't. I said yes. The wedding was chaos. She was nearly 2 hours late. Guests were whispering, photographers pacing, and Riot pacing even more. When she finally arrived, he didn't even smile. He leaned close to her and whispered something that made her eyes flicker. During the ceremony, his grip on her hand was tight, not affectionate, but possessive. At the reception, when she laughed with an old friend, he walked over and interrupted mid-conversation. His voice was low but sharp. I didn't catch every word, but I heard embarrassing and disrespectful. Later, I saw him pull her behind the reception tent. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but his words cut through the night like glass. "You made me look like a fool," he hissed. "You're not ready to be a wife. You're still that stupid girl." She murmured, I'm sorry, please." When she came back out, her makeup was perfect again, except for one tear stain she hadn't noticed. She smiled at everyone and blamed it on allergies. After that night, I began to withdraw. Every call was shorter. Every conversation felt rehearsed. Sometimes I'd hear him in the background, asking, "Who are you talking to?" before the line went dead. Eventually, I stopped reaching out. I told myself I'd wait for her to come back to me when she was ready. 2 years passed. Then, one night, I dreamed of her. She was standing in the street outside that quiet house, barefoot, holding her phone. She said, "You stopped calling. I thought you'd come for me." When I woke up, my hands were shaking. A week later, she texted me, "Can we talk? I miss you." I stared at it for a long time. I missed her too. The girl who used to dance barefoot in my room at midnight, who used to make me laugh and until I cried. But I also knew that girl didn't exist anymore. I texted back, "We can talk, but not if Riot's there." She never responded. 3 months ago, Paloma called. Her voice cracked before she even said hello. She told me she was sorry for vanishing, that things had been hard. She didn't say Riot's name, but she didn't have to. I could hear him in the silence between her words, the kind of silence that feels watched. She asked if we could meet for coffee. Against every cautious instinct, I said yes. When she walked into the cafe, I almost didn't recognize her. Her once glossy hair was uneven, the ends jagged like she'd cut it herself. She wore a loose sweater despite the heat, sleeves tugged down to her wrists. Her eyes darted toward the door every few seconds, scanning. She smiled when she saw me, small and tentative. "Hey," she whispered, like the word might break something. I said, "Hey, stranger." We talked for an hour, maybe two. She avoided certain topics like they were landmines. When I asked about Riot, she said softly, "He doesn't like when I see people who make me think too much." She tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. That line haunted me. Over the next few weeks, we texted, cautiously at first, then more freely. Late at night, she'd send messages like, "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" Or, "I can't remember what I used to like." I told her she wasn't alone. Then, one night, I got a wall of text, messy, panicked, and raw. She said she didn't recognize herself anymore, that she felt like her own shadow. She said he'd started locking her phone in a drawer when he needed peace. I told her to leave. I told her I'd help. She said, "I can't. Not yet." A few days later, her messages stopped. 2 weeks passed before I heard anything. Her sister, Mia, called me out of the blue. Her voice was tight, rushed. She said Paloma had shown up at their parents' house in the middle of the night, shaking, barefoot, and crying. She'd finally left him. I sat on the edge of my bed and cried too. Mia said the fight that broke her had been bad. Riot had accused her of embarrassing him because she didn't answer his call during her art class. He'd thrown her phone against the wall. When she tried to pick up the pieces, he told her, "You should be grateful I care this much." She ran. She's been staying with her parents since then, trying to rebuild herself. It's slow. Some days, she's radiant again, taking community college classes, painting, even joining a small art group. Other days, she disappears into silence for hours. Last month, she asked me to come over. I found her sitting in her old childhood bedroom, surrounded by half-finished paintings. One canvas caught my eye. It was just streaks of red and black, chaotic, but in the center was a small gold figure. A girl, standing. "That's me," she said quietly, trying to remember how to exist. We sat together for hours. She told me she still jumps when she hears certain songs, still flinches when someone raises their voice. She said sometimes she misses him, not the real him, but the version she thought she was saving. I told her healing wasn't linear. That missing someone toxic doesn't mean you want them back. It just means you're human. She smiled, weak but real. "You sound like someone who finally figured out how to stop fixing people," she said. I laughed. Maybe I'm just tired. Then, a week ago, Riot showed up. He came to her parents' house, pounding on the door. Paloma froze. Her dad called the police while Mia pulled her into the back room. I stood in the kitchen, shaking, listening to him shout through the door, calling her ungrateful, selfish, lost without him. When the sirens finally came, he was still yelling her name. The officers escorted him away, but his eyes, they were wild, promising something unspoken. That night, Paloma didn't cry. She just sat there, staring at the wall, whispering, "He's not supposed to know where I live." She moved 2 days later, changed her number, started therapy. The end. You're not the AITA. Let's just get that out of the way before we dive in. You didn't ditch your friend, you didn't judge her, and you didn't make her choices for her. You were just standing on the sidelines watching someone you love walk into a slow-moving disaster, hoping she'd realize it before it swallowed her whole. That's not cruelty. That's the quiet kind of care most people don't notice. You saw what was happening before anyone else did. Riot was never mature. He was a walking red flag in a pressed shirt. The type who talks about love like it's a science project. All control, no warmth. He studied her, picked her apart, and called it devotion. And honestly, that whole "control isn't cruelty" line, that's straight out of the villain starter pack. You did the right thing by keeping your distance. People think stepping back means you've given up, but sometimes it's the only way to stay standing. You couldn't save her while she was still defending him. She had to see the cracks herself. And when she finally did, you didn't throw it in her face. You just showed up. That's what real friends do. Now, about Paloma, she's not weak. She's just someone who got caught in a story that rewrote her piece by piece. It takes a long time to come back from that kind of control. Every tiny thing, choosing what to wear, laughing too loud, painting something messy, becomes an act of rebellion. And you gave her space to rebuild without pressure. That's rare. Here's the thing, you did enough, more than enough. You were her safe person, the one she could finally call when she was ready to breathe again. You weren't the hero, you were the anchor. And anchors don't move, they hold steady until the storm passes. So no, you're not the AITA. You're the quiet friend who loved someone through a nightmare and still managed to stay sane. That's strength, not selfishness. And if if we're being honest, the only Aita in this whole story is Riot, and he's not even a good one. He's like the villain who thinks he's deep because he quotes self-help lines with a straight face. Probably the kind of guy who says things like, "I'm not controlling, I'm just protective," while changing your phone password for security reasons. Bottom line, you didn't fail her. You just learned that love doesn't always mean rescue missions. Sometimes it just means waiting with the porch light on until your friend finds her way back home. Before we jump into the next story, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know your favorite part in the comments. AITA for snapping at my husband after he ruined the one morning I asked for. My name is Kinsley, and I'm 38. I live with my husband, Judson, and our two kids, Crew, who's 12, and Melanie, who's 8. Last weekend was my birthday. I didn't want gifts, flowers, or some fancy dinner. All I asked for was one small thing, a morning to myself. Just one morning where I didn't have to be the first one awake, where I didn't have to think 10 steps ahead. No alarms, no lunches, no chaos, just rest. Judson had the week off work, which felt like a sign that maybe, just maybe, it could actually happen. The night before, I walked him through everything he'd need to handle. The time to wake the kids, where Melanie's shoes were, how Crew liked his eggs, which bus stop they needed to get to. He nodded the whole time, barely looking up from his phone, saying, "Got it, don't worry." I wanted to believe him. I really did. That night, I set my alarm just in case, then turned it off. It felt rebellious, like a small act of self-care. I went to bed smiling, telling myself, "You deserve this." When the morning came, I heard the alarm ring, Judson's, not mine, and the familiar rustle of him getting up. I smiled into my pillow, listening as he walked into the bathroom. The shower turned on, and I figured he'd be quick. But time dragged. 15 minutes, then 20. By 30, I started to feel the unease creeping in. Downstairs, I heard the telltale sounds of disaster. A cupboard slamming, Melanie crying, Crew complaining. Someone spilled something. I waited for Judson to step in, to tell them what to do, to be the parent. The water was still running. By the time I threw back the blanket, my pulse was pounding. I walked downstairs to find chaos in full swing. Crew was arguing that he didn't have time for breakfast. Melanie was digging through her backpack in tears, and the counter looked like a tornado hit it. I didn't even think. I just started doing what I always do. Toasting bread, wiping milk off the table, finding socks, braiding hair. When Judson finally came down, his hair was damp, his shirt clean, his face calm. He stopped in the doorway, surprised to see me. "I thought you were sleeping in," he said casually, reaching for his coffee like nothing was wrong. "I tried," I said, my voice already shaking with everything I wanted to say. "But someone had to get them ready." He frowned, not angry, just confused, which somehow made it worse. "So, you're mad because I took a shower?" I just stared at him. "No, Judson, I'm upset because you promised me one morning, one where I didn't have to do it all, and you couldn't even give me that." He laughed a little, that soft, almost mocking laugh that never used to bother me, but now felt like a slap. "Okay, sorry for wanting to be clean," he said, shaking his head like I was being ridiculous. I didn't respond. I just stood there, watching him sip his coffee while I wiped cereal off the counter. The rest of the morning was quiet, that kind of sharp, heavy silence that hangs between people when they both know something broke. He kissed Melanie on the head before leaving, said goodbye to Crew, and didn't look at me when he walked out the door. The house stayed still after that. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the window. Outside, the world kept going, cars passing, birds chirping, while I felt like something inside me had stopped. When he came home that evening, I tried to stay calm. I made dinner. We ate with the kids. He asked about their day, and I answered for them because they were too busy watching TV. It felt robotic, like we were actors reading lines from a script we both memorized years ago. After the kids went to bed, I turned off the kitchen light and said, "You didn't even say happy birthday." He looked up from his phone. "Yes, I did. Yesterday morning." I shook my head. "No, you didn't. You said morning," and walked out of the room. He blinked, clearly confused. "Kinsley, it's just a day. Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" "Because it's not just a day," I said quietly. "It's every day, every morning, every night, every time I need you to show up, and you don't. I'm tired of being the one who remembers everything, who plans everything, who picks up what you leave behind." He looked away, sighing. "You're overthinking this again." That word, again, hit me harder than I expected, like he'd already decided that my exhaustion was just overthinking, that my hurt was an overreaction. I didn't say another word. I just walked upstairs, brushed my teeth, and crawled into bed. He stayed downstairs for another hour, maybe two. When he finally came up, I pretended to be asleep. He didn't say goodnight. He didn't even turn toward me. The next morning, I woke up early, not because I had to, but because I couldn't sleep anymore. I stood by the window watching the sunrise, the light hitting the walls of the room we'd painted together years ago. Back then, he used to call it our little safe place. Now, it just felt like a box full of echoes. I don't know when things started to feel this way, when love became logistics, when partnership became imbalance. Maybe it wasn't one moment. Maybe it was a slow build, like water rising inch by inch, until one day you realize you're already drowning. Judson came into the room, rubbing his eyes. "You're up early," he said softly. "I couldn't sleep," I said. He nodded, hesitating. "You still upset?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him everything, how small I felt, how invisible. But I just said, "I'm tired." He kissed the top of my head like that made everything better, then left the room. The smell of coffee drifted up the stairs a few minutes later, the same routine as always. That night, I wrote down one sentence in my notes app. I just wanted to rest, but maybe I need more than rest now. I wasn't planning to say anything more, but things changed after that morning. Not suddenly, not in a dramatic, movie-like way, but in the slow, uncomfortable way that real change tends to creep in. For the first week, Judson acted like nothing had happened. He was distant but calm, polite even, as if by avoiding the subject he could erase the tension that hung between us. I could tell he was hoping time would smooth things over, the way it usually did. But something in me had shifted that day, something quiet but irreversible. I stopped waiting for him. I stopped waking him when his alarm rang. I stopped setting out his coffee mug beside mine. The little acts of care that used to feel automatic now felt like tiny betrayals of myself. Every time I reached for his cup out of habit, I'd pull my hand back. Every time I started to remind him of something, I'd swallow it down. Instead, I focused on myself and the kids. I started running again in the mornings before they woke up, my body moving, my mind clearing. It was strange how even 30 minutes of breathing air that wasn't filled with someone else's needs could make me feel almost alive again. Judson noticed, though he pretended not to. He'd come downstairs to find the coffee pot already empty, the kitchen quiet except for the soft hum of the fridge. "You didn't make coffee?" he asked one morning, his tone sharper than usual. I shrugged. "You know how to make it." He blinked, clearly thrown off. "Yeah, but you always do." "Not always," I said, walking past him. "Not anymore." It wasn't about the coffee, of course. It was about everything that coffee symbolized. The invisible labor, the quiet taking care of someone who never noticed he was being cared for. A few weeks later, I got a text from my sister, Serafina. It was late, and the kids were already in bed. "Hey," she wrote. "I don't know if I should say this, but Judson's been talking to Theo about you." My stomach dropped. I called her immediately. She hesitated before answering. "He was venting," she said carefully. "He told Theo that you've been distant. He said you've been cold, ungrateful. He brought up that morning, said all you did was complain, and that he can't win with you." I didn't say anything for a long time. My throat felt tight. Serafina continued. "I told Theo to stay out of it, but I thought you should know." "Thanks," I said quietly. After I hung up, I sat there staring at the dark window, my reflection looking back at me. Ungrateful. The word echoed in my head like a bad song lyric I couldn't shake. The next evening, I confronted him. "I heard you've been talking to Theo," I said as soon as the kids were upstairs. Judson froze mid-step. "What?" Serafina told me. "You said I was ungrateful, that I complained too much." His expression shifted, first surprise, then irritation. "Oh my God, are we really doing this right now?" "Yes," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Because if you can talk about me to other people, you can talk to me." He sighed loudly, rubbing his forehead. "Kinsley, it wasn't like that. I was just venting. Everyone vents. About your wife? About feeling like I can't do anything right," he snapped. "You make it seem like I'm some lazy, selfish husband. I made one mistake, and you act like it defines me." "One mistake." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was unbelievable. "Judson, it's never been just one mistake. It's every morning, every night, every time I need help, and you look at me like I'm asking for too much. It's years of feeling like I'm on my own." He shook his head. "You're overreacting. Again, you always turn small things into." "Stop calling me that." I cut him off, my voice rising. "Stop saying I'm overreacting every time I tell you how I feel. You don't get to dismiss me because it's easier than facing what you've done." The room fell silent except for the sound of both of us breathing hard. Finally, he muttered, "You're making me the villain for nothing." I stared at him, exhausted. "No, I'm done pretending it's fine. I'm not mad anymore. Judson, I'm just tired. I'm tired of having to beg for partnership." He didn't answer. He just stood there, jaw tight, eyes darting away like he couldn't stand to look at me. That night, we barely spoke. He slept on his side of the bed, turned away from me. I could hear the faint, steady rhythm of his breathing while I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how we had gotten here, from the couple who used to laugh until we cried to two people barely holding a conversation. But the next morning, something strange happened. He woke up early. I smelled toast, the faint sound of plates clinking downstairs. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. When I went down, he was making breakfast, real breakfast, not cereal, not frozen waffles. Eggs, bacon, toast a little burnt, just like crew likes it. The kids were sitting at the table, surprised but happy. I didn't say a word. I just stood in the doorway watching him. When he noticed me, he looked nervous. More morning, he said softly. I thought I'd try to get them ready today. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. After the kids left for school, he came upstairs, standing in the doorway of our room. He looked different, tired, but humble. You were right, he said finally. I didn't realize how much you carry. I'm sorry. It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't everything I needed, but it was real. For a while, it got better. He started helping more, packing lunches, cleaning up without being asked. There were mornings when I actually got to sit down with my coffee before work, and that felt huge. The kids noticed too. One afternoon, Cruz said, Dad helped me find my lunchbox this morning. It was weird. I laughed. Weird's okay, I told him. Weird means different, and sometimes different is good. But not everything stayed easy. Some days Judson slipped back into old habits, leaving dishes in the sink, forgetting school events, brushing off my reminders. And each time, I felt that old ache rise in my chest. We fought again 2 weeks later. A small thing. He forgot to pick up Milani from dance, but it spiraled fast. I was in traffic, he yelled. You forgot. I yelled back. You always forget when it's not your schedule that matters. He punched the steering wheel, the sound echoing through the car. I'm trying, Kinsley. I'm trying. I know, I said through tears. But trying isn't the same as showing up. That night, we sat in silence at dinner. Milani picked at her food. Cruz stared at his plate. I could feel the kids' unease, the way tension soaked into the air like humidity. Kinsley, you're definitely not the Aita. You're just someone who finally got tired of doing everything while pretending it was fine. You weren't asking for much, just a peaceful morning where you didn't have to manage everyone else's chaos. And somehow that turned into a whole drama. Honestly, that's not on you. Judson messed up, plain and simple. You told him the plan, he ignored it, and then acted surprised when the day fell apart. It's not about a shower. It's about feeling like you can't ever relax without things going off the rails. And when you called it out, instead of apologizing, he tried to joke his way out. Classic move when someone doesn't want to face that they dropped the ball. You didn't go overboard. You were frustrated, rightfully so, after years of being the default responsible one. You didn't yell. You didn't throw things. You just finally stopped pretending it didn't bother you. That's not cold. That's honest. And honestly, I respect that you've started pulling back a bit. That's self-preservation, not punishment. Sometimes you've got to stop pouring your energy into people who only notice when you're running on empty. If Judson really wants to fix things, he'll have to show it with consistency, not grand gestures. Words are easy. Showing up every day, that's the real test. So yeah, you're not the Aita. You're just someone who's learning that peace doesn't come from keeping everyone else comfortable. It comes from finally giving yourself the space to breathe. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Got a story to share? Drop it in the comments and let us know which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely want to check out AITA for refusing to move back and even after my mom cried. Click here to watch it now.